Welcome to semi-finals of the KDU. Congratulations through 7 preliminary rounds and 2 first rounds so far. Congratulations. My name is Mustafa. I'll be your chair. With me, judging from the Philippines are Ryan, Vince, Javier, and Paolo. From Singapore, Megan, and from South Korea, Junpyo. Side government, we have Damansara, Jaya 2. And side opposition from Summerfield. Is at the Thai military does not have taken the Thai government through data. Before we begin, we'd like to maintain ample amounts of discussions if necessary. If you don't have any wish to enter the room, please do so between speakers. Please ensure phones are on and do not play any media during the speeches. Support make to able and you not be supporting. Very much. This is playing.
When the court decision to rule somebody, and in this case, Yingluck Shinawat, we think the decision that is constitutional is something was constitutional with them and back both this how we did not help. My argument for today. Let's first look at the political situation in Thailand and what our stance is. Because we think whether Yingluck Shinawat and the Thaksin Shinawat clan being there is something good or not, but we on our side, we want to promote the best constitutional ways in which we can best make sure that person that is there is legitimate, and we allow for the best kinds of democracy to ensue, the best kinds of ways we always determine democracy. Let's look at what happened in Thailand, because when Yingluck Shinawat was in power and there were restrictions for her, but there was also an opposition going against her. What happened when they had the election that allowed Yingluck Shinawat to continue being there? The Democrat Party, which was their opposition, forwarded a request to invalidate the elections and wanted the parliament to dissolve in order to give everyone the fair kind of ability to contest again the elections. What happened then? The Pheu Thai Party, which is the party coming from the Shinawats, forwarded a counter request that no, the Democrat Party should also dissolve, and because they only want to topple elections without any plans, without any democratic power. We think what happened here was this: the court overruled the Pheu Thai Party's request and invalidated that certain election and said that it was something that was invalidated. And after that, the court also removed Yingluck Shinawat from her power. We think in a decision like this, when the court already has a lot of power and precedence in giving and being able to remove this person from the system, we think it was something that was validated. And why then would we need the coup to come? The coup had any reason what happened? We think that means that number one, there would have been room for that actual demand that was not stagnated by certain violence. This means that the people on the ground would have been able to, the opposition would have been able to at least have some form of credence and precedence in fighting again for the same kinds of rights. But moreover, you allow for that idea that Shinawat being deemed improper by the improper by the court themselves themselves to be able to have that precedent and allow for proper democracy. Moreover, secondly, we think it was more likely in a situation where there's no coup for this international help to come in, whereby there will be international precedent and confirmation that this is something that's legitimate and the proper ways of removing someone from power. We think on a situation of having a coup, it's not something that's legitimate, but moreover, it's something that is deemed wrong by international institutions all around. We think that the military coup was something that was unnecessary. Why? Before that, yes.
Understand that as long as the military, the government was in power, it was not going away. The rural party still supported the government. There were clashes every single day. The Thai capital and business stopped to a standstill. The military stepped in to stop the protests.
Okay, number one, you have to prove to me how with the military the protest isn't going to continue, because I'm going to prove to you how it's still going to continue on your side. But even if you say that you always you want to remove Shinawat in that situation, we don't think the coup will necessarily do that. Let's look at the past precedents. Coup happened in 2006 when they wanted to remove Shinawat from power. And same situation after, whereby Shinawat still after doing anything in that situation. And that the only way you can remove a pathology, remembrance of the particles is when we remove them constitutionally, which is what already happened in Thailand, which means of the court. When the court deemed you illegitimate, that was the only deeming them as someone that couldn't no longer stand. We think that when you allow them to come of the give them the harmful narrative that they were the victims and they didn't deserve to be out of power in that situation. More on that later. But why do we think something harmful and unnecessary? Because we think that even if you are able to prove that this that the Shias will come back into power, we think that ultimately you will lead to the same framework that you allow for historical elites to continue being, because we gave you the past precedents, right? In 2000 where the military took over, still had the same people coming back into power. We never saw the change happening on your side. But what was the harms that will happen, and the harms that will happen now, and is happening now in the coup today? We think that number one is something that is seen as undemocratic and illegitimate. That means the people that were ousted before, people that are Shinawats right now that were ousted before, can say that I was removed illegitimately and will force the red shirts and the protest against these ideas, because they believe that the people above them, the people that should be there, should still be there because they were removed democratically. Unlike the courts that already deemed that illegitimate, those kinds of constitutional way. But the coup, whereby saying, you should give more freedom. If for your power in combating this, they were the ones to the from culture. When you create precedents and you happening, you look at the situation of time, you already have equal of, and we already think kind of not have these military coups. When you ask and allow for these military coups to continue persevering, you remove the idea that we are removing ourselves from the traditional values. The people on the ground to continue to the idea that using the army will always solve my problem. I should always use the army and prolong war violence, because that's the only way I'll ever solve my problems. We did internationally to allow remove the idea of recognition international recognition is necessary to every country. When they use the military coup, there's something that's illegitimate and it's something that not everyone on the ground has the power to go against and have the power to vote for. We think it's harmful because it's a legitimate way people get into power. We don't think it's democratic principles that we always stand for.
Thank you very much. We'd now like to invite the Leader of Opposition, Raj, to open the side opposition. Jaya here.
they want room for democracy, right? They claim that a decision by the court is legitimate, and somehow if the court tells you that this is a government that people can't follow, their protest, they would suddenly listen to the court, and the supporters would have no problem with it. We tell you that they agree to the fact that, no matter what happens, they'll be re-elected. We tell you this is the problem that they talk about, and we tell you that how having the army in the scenario is the best to get that, right? They came up with one that how it's unnecessary. We tell you that the party is supporters as well. We tell you that these supporters would not listen to the court because they're extremists and they believe they have blind faith in their governments to begin with. We tell you that the army with their forces, who's in Thailand, are the best option that is available. When talked about 2006 was the same scenario. We tell you that in 2006, the court that pronounced the party to begin with, they still were elected army influence. We tell you that the case we have is very simple. What they claim to legitimate is very illegitimate in our case. We tell you that they never show why having the army is illegitimate to begin with. We tell you that the army is an absolute necessity, and room for democracy can only come through our case, which directly clashes with their case, right? So we're going to talk about why the army needs to be reinstated. We talk about the international image of the Thailand army has been for years, right? We tell you that they haven't played and army with a lot of patriotism, and there have been reports that news we feel safe under the army, and all these protests that have been going in through the worst urban areas. We tell you that these are the people who feel safe because of the Thailand army. That even if we are wrong, claiming that they have a proper image, it needs check and balances, and this army personnel we believe who should be obliged to follow the government orders. We tell you that they still have a role to be the neutral parties and save their own country. We tell you that they further pledged 3 months for a new cabinet, a new cabinet which would make the country, which would give the country a democratic party. We tell you that if they are not present in the scenario and do not have a democratic party, a democratic cabinet, we tell you that either ways, according to their policies, we would have Shinawatra elected again. So we tell you that when they hope and when they ask for a new cabinet, they have the military power to have the military, to have the best democratic party for the nation, because the image that they hold and the consequences that they're aware of, right? We tell you that how the government has failed, right? We tell you that the right to govern only comes when you have the people following you, right? We tell you that these people who are divided in this population, who are divided into people who support who are red shirts protesters and yellow shirts protesters, are the rural areas and the urban areas who follow these very two different ideologies, two very different political parties. We tell you that these people have not been united under these political parties' policies. We tell you that how there were rice schemes by the Thaskin Shinawatra, who bought the farmers in the rural areas and have given them every opportunity for them to become economically wealthier and have their blind support. The very moment that happened, they played dirty political games to have their support and to make them go directly against the urbanized people. We tell you that these people are not united. This creates civil chaos in the nation. The very moment these people are not united and these people hate each other, we tell you that this is a scenario of a civil war. We tell you the very moment this happens, the economy fails, because we believe these two groups of people depend on each other, and the only neutral party that exists in the scenario is the army. We believe that the court is not enough because court has no military power or military power to stop these people from creating any further violence. The violence is also primarily is a factor that needs priority, because the very moment you stop these people, you stop these protesters from killing any further people and tell them that any moment you create any violence, we have military backings to stop you. We tell you that these protests are stopped as well. The very moment these armies who are the neutrals and these armies who have a proper image in their nations provide them with a new cabinet, we tell you that there are no problems of having Thaskan Shinawatra or the opposition party in the scenario. But before moving on, yes, sir.
So we know that you proposed that army was to remove Yingluck's influence. But the very caretaker prime minister, which the military elected, is under Yingluck's influence as well. How do they remove the influence?
We tell you that these people, in either way, in your solution and in our case, are the in either way, these parties are going to be selected. But we tell you that historically, this army have taken coups and they have led a country towards a democratic party, right? We have tell you that historically, they have not been greedy and they have not helped. The moment they provide a government which knows that, you know what, every time I do something which angers people, there is the army which would go against me. We tell you that the right to govern is only strengthened the moment they're afraid, or the moment they're capable, the moment they know that what the people can do, and the moment they know the people's ability. We tell you that furthermore, these red shirts and yellow shirts protest, right? We tell you international pressure, these who have international pressure to begin with, because these individuals do not know, and these individuals are directly harmed by any international pressure. But the moment you know the army civilian outside your house who would shoot you down your house and try to create their violence is something that directly harms them, that has an effect upon them. So what have we talked about? So what have we told you, right? We came up and talked about that, you know what, room for democracy is only these people, these governments hold the right to govern, is only going to be the policies. And we've also talked about these legitimate decisions by the court that talk about provide the same consequences that we are talking about in our worst case scenario. We have talked about that how this happened in the nation, and these armies are regarded as the most patriotic army in the nation. If these armies have direct influence on the government, we also saw that people only having veterans.
Thank you very much. Now I invite Evan.
Hello, okay. Let's think of history in Thailand. Thaksin was removed as ruling party of Thailand, right? What next? Yingluck took over, right? Is about to occur post this military coup, where the caretaker prime minister, I hope I don't get his name wrong, his name is Minister Nimwat Trambong Bumsong Paisan, right? That's his name, right? That's his name, right? He's under Yingluck's influence as well. They want to propose to remove the influence, influence on their side. Actually productive. You think it was counterproductive? Yingluck to still remain under their side, unopposed, unjudged, allowing the military to rule or based on their own will. Let's tackle them 4 levels of rebuttal. Firstly, he told you about national how they follow things. So he told that they follow government's orders. What government's orders are no under your side post this military coup? We don't understand that. But furthermore, there's a precedent that this military has to combat the red shirt resistance, which is against them, that they encounter bloodshed. Their will upon the people, and they have no democratic will. Their own mission upon this circumstance. Secondly, he was elected again without the coup, and things will be better outside. Things will be better without the coup, and the Thaksin government will continue to rule, and Thaksin government is bad, things like that. Outside is not challenging the idea that Thaksin's government was bad. Outside challenging the idea that the military coup was unproductive. Because we told you the caretaker prime minister already has influence. But furthermore, outside, how do we improve that situation? Eliza already told you sufficiently, left unrebutted by the way, that it's an incentive to stand for election now, considering that Yingluck was ruled unconstitutional by that has removed the court has such influences within the institutions that already exist within the jurisdiction. The Democratic Party has in would be absolute, could be potentially contested well on the outside and under the even the opposition under your influence to remain challenged. The people won't be united. Military was killing the protesters under your side, right? People anyway. The protest for each party, Democratic Party, stand action under their side. Protesters are still going to protest. The is ready to combat more people. We don't see how you stop civil wars under your side. Lastly, insufficient. My sufficient this argument, right? Morality, a huge in ruling individuals and dishing out proper punishment to those individuals. Democratic action. We don't think violence should take a precedence under the situation. The military coups should take a. When we already have proper precedences for proper democratic country, which you challenge and which you hinder under your. I'll take a rebuttal. All right. So,
we know for a fact that before the army came in, protests were going on and people were dying. Please tell me how the army stopping is a bad thing, the status quo.
I already told you why he isn't stopping that. Because they and the army, they are ready to fight the red shirt supporters. We don't say how your side, you are going to stop that form of bloodshed, which will continue under your side. Within the yellow shirt supporters are also going to join into the battle to say that, hey, the Democratic Party is not running for election. Let us state our intention of why the Democratic Party should run for elections. And they'll continue to fight, We don't think your side resolves that until a proper election is held, which will most likely be held on the outside. There's more potential for that to be held on the outside when the Democratic elections prior to the coup. I'll prove that more in my speech right now. My argument is this: the post-coup harms and how that's so detrimental towards the people on the ground as well. Even before the coup, and the LO already agreed to this, they only dip slightly into shit. But what happened post-coup is that Thailand is now facing financial markets taking fright at them. They cut them from international capital. Other countries are unwilling to trade with them due to this military coup. They have no proper recognized government under the situation. There's no incentive to trade, right? Furthermore, tourism is a huge economy which cut off severe because people deem and don't want to travel anymore. The military is a figure and they're running. No one actually has an incentive to go there. Major harm is this, right? There's a lack of action in Thailand right now, and the military has no intent to change that lack of economic direction. The harm of the ruling party, the people on the ground face the harm of this economic turmoil. Because there's no signs of that turmoil ever being solved as long as the military continues to restrict the help and aid which could potentially come other national operations. The military stated that their intention of setting one certain values that they didn't accept that which happened within our country. We don't think that the aid which could potentially come under outside. But for post-coup harms, I'm going to state now, is how you incentivize more violence, right? I've already told you how the red shirt resistance is bound to occur and how there's bloodshed under that section. The harms people on the ground who were using democratic processes. Okay, sure, there were certain extremists who used gunfights during the protest, but look, we already discounted that, right? Where individuals could stand for election on the outside, the protest could severely decrease. But furthermore, let's go on to that, right? People on the ground who are using democratic processes to strive for change now face severe harm because there's a huge spillover of that violence between the red shirt and the military as well. Martial law means that police is no longer responsible for security, but the military is responsible for the security, right? This means the military is already allowed to impose its own will upon whatever laws it's willing to enact, and bloodshed is bound to occur. Without the army having a coup, we think elections would most likely stand on the outside, where the Democratic Party has an incentive to stand for elections, but the impact of that, right? We think the impact of that means protesters will be less willing to go out and seem radical to support their party, to allow more voters to come in and vote for the right party to stand for election. This means less incentivizes for democratic exchange and political discourse which is conducive to occur, compared to their side where military coup imposes and infringes upon the right to proper democratic exchanges to allow a proper government to rule Thailand. We think our side takes to this debate.
Much. Either opposition, Naweed, Summerfield.
The best case scenario brought up by the population side is basically they want to make sure that there's going to be a military coup, so there's going to be a democratic position taking place where there is no acceptance of the court's orders by entire rural population outside the country. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, the rural population of Thailand makes up more than 50% of the entire country, and the court's decision was protested against by these very people. When the court's decision is protested against by most of the country, how in any hell would there be an election which take place, ladies and gentlemen? Understand the fact that when you talk about the idea of the court's decisions, when you talk about the idea of the military as a body which is not accepted the people, that the military is an embody which is coming in and not the situation. Right position is both sides are in a standpoint and a gunpoint. They have to kill each other at the blink of an eye. Why people believe both are right? Because the red shirts were the taxation of the side, the yellow shirts in democratic, both of them believe that they are in the right side because they have been brought up politically. Any decision against why? It's because of the fact that these people, why? Because the opposition has made into a unpopular figure in Thailand, and the Unity Party live on the feelings of the people, and at the end of the day, the protest people. The red shirts make sure that this will not be held, ladies and gentlemen. Let us see in which scenario the election gets held. In a scenario where we will protest the country for the next 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, the voters of the two different parties, there's party from doing so. In our case, the protests are being held and protests are being stopped, ladies and gentlemen, because the place to make sure there's going to be a cabinet in 3 months and an election in 1 year, ladies and gentlemen. So when the army has pledged to do this, ladies and gentlemen, who are we to question that there is not going to happen? There's not going to this thing will not happen. At the end of the day, we see no precedence for this happening. Talking about the Thai government controlled by Thaksin Shinawatra is elected every time, even after a coup. Ladies and gentlemen, we see no democratic way of happening. If the people want a democratic influence, at that point of time, we believe that the democracy still support this, right? At the end of the day, we need to position, because at the end of the day, this is something that properly government. At the end of the day, election, and the one the party, we don't have option to the fourth thing, government. The court is ready to support us. You need to understand the court, the court is not being able to carry out to stop the military body, which is stopping place. The suffering of Thailand, as the Professor Secretary talked about, does not happen. Because these protests regularly destroy in Thailand. This is the fact a country. When does this backbone get destroyed? It's when fights the urban area in Germany. It's when these people do not ask for anything and everything in Germany. At the end of the day, do not how election and as well military want to make sure, for instance, obviously, the military has greater concerns of who to make sure that people first. The military is trying to make that and that's why India will economy. Going at the end of the day in Thailand, if the military did not step in, would still at the end of the day make sure it will problem by making the Thai government the victim, right? About how the Thai government becoming the victim would eventually make sure that the Thai government is seen by the people. Because people against the Thai government in the first place, the yellow shirts are so many, they hate the idea of and the negative harmfulness lies even in the Thai government. Our still doesn't the rights invented by the human Shinawatra, which gave more power to the farmers, right? Divide the country, the portion even case they are going to tell you that we need to practical ways stop this protest and make sure the economy benefits from it, the people benefit from this range. So moving on, yes.
Okay, on both scenarios, violence will still occur. Sure, harms of taxes
influence right now would be to say the tax. The tax regime. There is no democratic influence. If the people want to taxation of how the hell will we stop this? The idea we don't know what the military range at the end of this is the best to carry this. We need iron no and every how the day create a range is election 1 year danger. They have no timeline established by the supporters in those army and when their model was under no structure taking place because everyone used to fight in country. The military step whenever there is a problem, whenever there is an unjust influence that gets inside the country, when people literally step in and make sure people step forward, never to be scared to test because their ideology is still going. At the end of the day, there is not stopping any country's protest. It's doing so anyone doing every single party. And the military is proving itself to be an impartial being, anything wrong. Not doing any action. The people are choosing the military is the safest option, most option possible. At the end of the day, what do we see? We see a debate practicality where we see this case.
In groups in Thailand. I don't hear anything different about what side opposition thinks this particularly can present to us today. Because the problem with that is that the military, the person who's in charge, who's in power, is still under Shinawat's influence. And even people now, how they're going to deal with that, basically, let's kill the system. But something to do with ideology. It stands for, especially when you try to get rid of that influence in such a way. There are two things we have to talk about in this debate. First, what happened with these benefits? And second, what in both what was achieved? First, it happened because they basically told us things. First, they told us that the militaries brought peace and they stopped the protests somehow. We don't think so. Because even before the coup, the rich shirts had already proclaimed that if there was a coup to happen, they would increase their protests even more. And we think that that's something that has gained a lot of media coverage already. Clearly, they haven't been reading up much. But even if the military has stopped the protest, we don't think that firstly it was that we think that it was constitutional. Second, in the long term, it would have ended the rich shirts anyway because they were already on imploding if such a thing would happen. We've already seen in the last coups that have happened in Thailand that there's a very long recovery period, right? We think that of the ultimately harmful not just for Thais right now, but in the future. The courts cannot say. We think that pre-coup they were already about to die down, right? Because of the ousting of Shinawat. Because we think that they were ready, in fact, for democratic actions. Opposition be constitutional, right? And the other side, there's nothing really much to say because the court's constitutional. What on earth could they argue instead without meaning? We think that on our side, if we had stuck with what was happening before that, because both sides had an incentive to gain that kind of political support, right, in the elections that could have come. Our worst case is this, that even if Shinawat is elected again, at least there would have been more political discourse that could have happened on our side leading up to these elections, and there was more incentive for the people elected to become more moderate support. What happens in there is political, especially since there's been a cut-off of media, of TV stations and radio in Thailand. There's no such thing as discourse going on. If they were to have elections, the only people who would get in power again was the ruling family we already have today. What was the second idea they gave to us? They told us that the military does what the government and the people want, and therefore they're neutral. Basically, they're saying that the courts don't have guns to force people to carry out their rulings, and that's why they need to wait for the government. But we don't think so, right? Because they're not a collective reflection of what people wanted, right? That's why they had to use their guns to get power. They were never, nobody wanted them. The people on the ground, in fact, were ready, and they said, we want elections. We don't like this coup because this is what is stagnating. This is what is forcing us not to have the election at the end of the day. Because of that is what, because the government that was ousted will still, at the end of the day, the military is not doing what the people want. They're going against their will at the end, even more than that. No, thank you. But what's the third thing they told us? They told us that historically we can force democracy with coups. This came on the first speaker. No, to happen 18 times in Thailand because clearly they don't work, right? Like Einstein said, right? Don't use the same methods over again and expect different results, right? Even if someone's changing something somehow, with governments and democracies in general is to have international recognition, right? Because you need kinds of international relations, for, especially for tourists to come in, which is a main economic driving factor in the Thailand economy, right? Considering that coups have been so badly accepted by the international community over the vast amounts of times that have happened, what's going to happen to them? Even if they have a democracy, it won't be a democracy that is validated by any other country because it's associated with violence, because it's a democracy that outside opposition themselves have said will be able to use violence again if something bad happens. What did we talk to you about? What really happened here? We told you three things, right? That firstly, there was a precedent of the 2006 coup failed, right? Right? Moved by violence, and therefore it wasn't unconstitutional. Therefore, they should have been in power anyway. And they're allowed to say these kinds of things, right? And that's harmful generally for the opposition because now they seem as if they're the bad guys in this thing. You value the rhetoric of the opposition that they're the ones fighting for democracy because you have a bad connotation upon it. But what was the second idea that we told you? We told you that there were huge post-coup harms, right? That even the democracy, the military coup that was there, could even influence the future elections that happened there through intimidation. But far less.
Ma'am, can you please tell me, under your model, how do you propose that we stop the violence that is already going on in Thailand?
I already analyzed to you just now how the protest is already going down, how people did want was only exacerbated by your side. At the end of the day, what really happened was this. Thailand's economy took a downfall because nobody wanted to go there and have trade with them. And most importantly, the protests were increased. Many people were harmed because of that. What could Thailand really been? there's two things that they told us about. First, they told us that the supporters would never be changed by the courts. But we don't think that's true, right? Because if it's a legitimate thing, we think, and the whole world goes in, we think it's more likely to decrease the support that they have, especially with things like international and the ability for them to interact with liberal cultures that come there for tourism or for them to go out to school, right, in other countries. But even if they are not changed, we think it can make the cause illegitimate. We can radical with what is constitutional. In balance, the coup only validated the supporters and anything. Now, you do not kill an island. You kill it by telling them the root, the whole international platform believes that you can really change things. What's the second idea they told us about? They told us that disunited and there was civil, people would have been disunited and have military needed to come in. And the coup disunited people even more because themselves to protest with occurred. Considering how incredibly conflict that happened, you only split the people more and they be united together for things like democracy, to stand for things like democratic elections. What if we talk to the president of how the court overruled, you know what, and then remove various forces by the president not show down in the direction.
Like, I think we're about the slide of by
where it does, and then it is separate into bodies, and the group of is going to fight for different ideologies, and they will not give it up. They have extremist ideologists. And what happens there? A country of chaos where the war goes on for decades, and that is where it is lost. They come up with a country, body, don't want to stop chaoses. They talk about a country where this is fighting, talk about a country where the court decision had voters, ladies and gentlemen, and see the flaw in the very basics. Before I move on to show you why the case, how this international image is very important. No, when the people are dying, I do not care about image because I need to save my citizens in the basics to have an international image. And then we see we got life in this, but then right? They talk about cinema again. This is when in a country and ideology is wrong and nobody can support it. We eradicate an ideology by telling them that it is wrong. We tell people support it and not do every single supporter out there, and that is simply not viable. And we do not vouch to change that idea. And they should was ideology. They talk about how this power distribution will be right. Now, let me, the first thing comes up and tells me the party in power had the support of the rich. So that means the party support that tells us that this financial support can eventually lead you to get more powers. Why? Because financial support is a big election to begin with, not taken, ma'am. And then and there we see the idea of equal election doesn't exist under their model. Now move on. Let us legitimate for the army to intervene. Ladies and gentlemen, who are the army? They are the people who has been selected from every class and every of this army has
and the urban areas. Hence, we do not see a biasness that exists in the very secondary level. I tell you, these aren't work for the government of the government. These aren't works for the people and the law of the people, and this came up in the in power position just to save the citizens. And we believe it is legitimate for this army to come in power because they're simply fulfilling their responsibilities, not taken. So, moving on, then they come up and talk to us about how this army will be able to bring bring any kind of hits, and that there has been 18 coups. Exactly, ma'am. Even after coups, the army is being Thailand society. What does that tell us, ladies and gentlemen? That tells us the whole citizen is with the majority of the citizens support the army and support the coup. We believe it is legitimate and it is democratic to begin with, not taken, sir. They come up and talk to us develop democracy, how they fail to show us that logical case at a very primary level. And on secondary level, we talk about the me and the punishment. We believe the core law saying that illegitimate, necessarily on the very first level. And on secondary level, they come up and talk to us about how this actually army coup actually gives them the right to play the victim, right? Ladies and gentlemen, in the very primary level, we understand that this red shirt the court's decision to begin with, and they are already playing the victim, ladies and gentlemen, and they are saying them to that and take decision, make our balance equal. And before I
on your side, you can keep this amount of time. What happens the violence to come back anyway?
First of all, let me tell you why think about the first. Because when people are dying, think about saving them on a first level. Secondary level, I tell you, future benefits will be there. There is a future for future government. Because the governments know that these people, that there is an elite group of people who will not stop at anything when it comes to saving the citizens, when it comes to saving the country. That the government, future governments now know that the army will nothing at the from future governments to from screwing. Moving on, they came up and talk about how it's unconstitutional. Then they come up and talk about radicality, right? How radical is, right? And the way the situation had higher, we know decisions to save these people because cannot vouch for democracy, cannot vouch for democratic government, and then their decision is completely flawed. Moving on, they came up and talked to us about how court already decided and it's legit enough, right? If the idea was telling someone that your ideology is wrong would change their ideology, then we wouldn't see Al Qaeda terrorists to begin with. The whole international community has been shouting for years it is ethically correct. The Islamic community has been shouting for years it is not ethically or morally correct to kill civilians, and still Al Qaeda doing that. Why? That's the extremist mentality to begin with. And then and there we see the red shirts will not stop their violence, even if you try to take their ideology wrong. And then there, ladies and gentlemen, their case completely falls on their face. Moving on, they come up and talk about national army and government orders. We tell you, this army is not the government. This army is simply of the country. General citizens stood up on the most dire time when the country called for a face, and that is where we see the army is the only way out. They come up and then talk about how all the dying. That is so that for army on the coup, the violence was going on full force where left a father and without a husband, and that is where the army stopped. Because when the army comes in with big tanks and big guns and whatnot, ladies and gentlemen, and that's where the normal people, extremists, are scared because they're facing extreme power taken on a match, and ladies and gentlemen, the democracy that they, because democracy is not promoted under their ideology, ladies and gentlemen. I'm proud to propose.
Thank you very much. That concludes the both sides. Now we'd like to continue high-speed percent opposition.
To practicality. It's practical, right? So, to actually where election second for different change to end at the time when it will end in German. However, you need to understand that there's a difference in ideologies here. The ideology of the red shirts will never change because they hate Thaksin Shinawatra so much to the extent that they will die rather than allow Thaksin Shinawatra to control the future generations. While in our case, we have the army which steps in as an impartial body and stops any and all protests from going in. It stops any and all people from protesting undemocratically. And what it does, so in German, is to make sure that the election gets held on a non-biased way in German. They talk about how we are making victims of the Thaksin Shinawatra government and English Shinawatra government, right? In German, we do not care if we are making a victim of the in German. It's because they need to make sure that these people, the red shirts who support them at the end of the day, are still not coming into power and not killing innocent civilians in the line of fire because they need to make sure that the ideology gets passed in German. We do not debate here on whether or not it is right for the Thaksin Shinawatra or Young Shinawatra to come into power. We debate on the basis of how right is it to make sure that these people do not die. Ladies and gentlemen, what's the first prerogative of the army, and why did my first speaker bring his principal justification as that? We came up and we told you that the army intervenes. There's an absolute need to do so, and that absolute need stems from the fact that the army is needed because the people are dying, and there is no other body that can stop the people from dying at the very first level. And we told you exactly why the people are dying, right, ladies and gentlemen? Because people will not change, because these red shirts simply do not stop protesting at the end of the day, because they believe their cause is righteous, and they believe that if they stop protesting, their families and their people will simply die. The court's decision is invalidated by the very fact that the red shirts continue protesting in German. At the end of the day, even if the army coming into power, it makes protests go on, the army stops that with an iron fist, allowing a cabinet to be established in 3 months and an election to get held in 1 year. In their timeline, in German, there is no guarantee that there will be an election in German, and we believe an election is absolutely necessary to make sure that the country gets anything out of this at the very first place. Secondly, the idea of Thaksin Shinawatra's influence is a very ridiculous idea. You need to make sure that these people get this influence gets to end, right? In Germany, to understand this is an ideology, and this is something which cannot end simply, right? In Germany, they come up and they tell us that the only problem they have is that the benefit of this motion does not go to the fact that the governments of Thaksin Shinawatra related governments are elected every year. That's the problem, right? In Germany, that's what they want to end. So, in Germany, what do we see is the process here? You to understand that the people are either stupid enough or ideological enough to make sure that the governments, Thaksin Shinawatra related governments, come into power at that point of time. It's a duty of the international community and us to support them democratically and allow them to take a place in an election and allow their wishes to be carried forward. We do not believe that in any debate you can come up and tell us that the people are important enough to listen to their protests, right, in German. At the end of the day, even if the people's protests are not important enough, at that point of time, you need to understand that the people still want something and you need to give it to them, in German. Even if the election bringing in a government which is wrong for the people still are taking control of the government and taking control, and that is the basic fabric of democracy that we see here today, right, in German. The arguments about international pressure and the economic suffering brought up by the second speaker is completely invalidating the case. The government is still stopping the protest and going a very long way towards doing that. However, the red shirts and the yellow shirts are continuously further propagating the protest because they do not have an end point, because they do not believe that there is something that is wrong with their protest in German. As long as you do not make someone understand that they have done something wrong and need to stop doing so in German, until that point, you will never stop and they will never stop in German. You need to understand, as long as the debate on practicality, team proposition will never take this case home. Because at the end of the day, in German, even if you continue to look at history and 18 coups in German, you need to understand the only way these coups are successful, not in a democratic election at the very end of the day. Without that, in German, we believe we are in a state of chaos, in a state of anarchy. Thank you. We leave it in this.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the last speaker for this debate, Evan from Damansara, Jaya to do
Two reasons why side opposition lost today's debate. I'm going to tackle two issues under this main question, right? What was the role of the military coup and how did it play out, right? There were two things stated from the LO speech, and these two are the issues which we won under our side and they lost. Number one, how to remove Thaksin's influence, and number two, how to stop the violence, right? Let's go to the first issue, how they remove Thaksin's influence. Because under this issue, we really didn't know what they tried to stand for. The LO came up and told us all the harms of Sinawat's rule and how the military coup would somehow remove their influence. Then the DLO came up and spent 5 minutes telling how under our side, if elections were to stand, the Thai party were to win and how that's bad as well, and how Thaksin's influence will still occur and how that's bad. So we thought under that point that, hey, okay, maybe they didn't really want Thaksin's influence to continue. But then when I POI their side twice about how they would remove Thaksin's influence under their side, they said that, hey, oh no, we don't want to kill off all of Thaksin's supporters under that side. But hey, if that's what you're trying to stand for, then we don't really know, right? Do you want to remove Thaksin's influence or do you not want to remove Thaksin's influence? But the whip, he wrapped it up, right? He told you this, right? We don't want to remove Thaksin's influence. But then that contradicts your whole case. Because firstly, all the harms of Sinawat's rule will still exist under their side. But secondly, all the harms that more violence will still occur and the red shirt and yellow shirts will continue to fight will still occur under their side. They never remove the influence of this harmful political government that they themselves stated time and time again through all the 7-minute speeches that they gave. So we're not really sure until the end of the day what their side tried to stand for in terms of how to deal with Thaksin's influence and how they want to counter that under their side. Our side was very clear under this side, under this point, right? We told you that we were the only side with potential to change that harmful democratic means that they want to propose the Thaksin rule, right? We told you that the unprecedented ruling that Yingluck was unconstitutional was something we needed to build on more and more on democratic exchanges compared to the violence that a military coup would have occurred. But furthermore, let's tackle this second idea, right? Because we won the first idea on how our side was clear and how we remove Thaksin's influence, right? Second point, how we stop violence, because this is the main contention on their side. We told you under their side, violence still occurs. The red shirt resistance has gained huge strides in gaining the rural areas by opposing the army, right? We think the whip told you himself, right? The army will come in with tanks. Doesn't that sound like preposition of warfare to you? We think it does, right? We think bloodshed will still occur under their side. But we told you how we countered that under our side, right? When elections were to happen, where people want to get more supporters, they want to be less radical, to gain more fence-sitters to their side under this situation, right? Those are situations which were logical and which were bound to happen should the military coup not have stepped in. Then they told you furthermore a few other things, right? Militaries are doing people's will. People love the army. I don't think martial law was something that Thai people want. I don't think sleeping at 10 was something people wanted, right? I think people really hated the army in the first place. That's why after 18 times, people still fought and fought and fought again at the end of the day, right? Eliza POI, the last speaker on this point, right? Then he told you this, right? We only want to focus on the short term. That is an inability to prove the long-term security which you want to provide under their side as well. Then he told you furthermore and build upon that, right? We want to see huge benefits through this military coup. Sure, but that's what they told us 18 other times in the past. And we have not seen any huge benefits which they want to propose. Instead, we've seen more violence considering they paint the status quo as so violent. We've seen that violence occurring because of the military coup that happened in 2006, where they failed to remove the influence of Thaksin's rule. So the best case scenario under this point is that violence occurs under both sides, but violence also occurs under their side as well, and even more heavily under their side. But what we told you was how under our side, we have potentially removed the violence through the elections, but under their side, they will never remove this violence should the military coup continue to exist, should the economy remain in turmoil, should the people still suffer the extreme harms that they wanted to pay under their side. We are the only side which stood for Thailand's peace. We were the only side which stood for Thailand's democracy. We are the side which should take this bait.
Thank you very much. Debaters across the floor, shake hands. Leave the room. The decision will be announced at the convening hall. Likewise, applies to the audience. Thank you very much.